Hi everybody, this is our special program. I'm hosting today a special guest with English program. My special guest today is Toltu Tufa from Australia. Toltu Tufa was born and raised in Australia. She speaks Afan Oromo and she is a founder of Afan publication to promote the Oromo language and culture in diaspora. So Toltu, thank you so much for joining us today to be part of our special program.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, as we know, you are the founder of Afan publication to promote the Oromo language and Oromo culture in diaspora. What motivates you, Toltu?
I think what motivates me to do my work, particularly in terms of Afan publications, is the idea that people who are connected with their identity and with their language grow up to become healthy people, well-rounded people, and contributing people. I think the more languages we speak, the better. The more likely you are to speak and understand your mother tongue, the more likely you are to be a conscious contributing member to your society, which starts from your family. So it's for that reason I chose to focus on the Oromo language for children to pass it on to a new generation who don't have access to learning their mother tongue languages in overseas countries. However, since I released my products for children overseas, there has also been interest back in Oromia in the past. And of course, the quality and the nature of the products is world-class, first-class, and something that I'm willing to share with the whole world, which is the story, the history, and the language of the Oromo people.
Yes, recently you had a talk show on TEDx on the title of How to Change the World in 3 Steps. So you had invited a public to comment you on which title you're gonna talk. So have you collect any information or suggestion from your audiences, or have you choose yourself?
I think the Oromo community was honored to have the opportunity to have their story being told on TEDx, and I was lucky that I was someone who had the opportunity to do that. I knew I wanted to share the Oromo story, but I wanted to make sure, and I wanted the Oromo people to feel like this was their opportunity. So if there was a message they wanted the world to know, I wanted the world to be able to hear what they wanted to say. So I made sure that the suggestions that came through were also shown in my story, and it was a successful story, and it was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, I would like to ask my technician today to display some parts of the talk show so our audiences will see about your the talk show you had recently.
Thank you.
As a child who was born and raised in Australia, I knew my mum was the daughter of proud Turkish parents. And I knew my father descended or came from a nation of people called the Oromo. That's O-R-O-M-O. And as a child, I knew the Oromo people were the largest indigenous population in Ethiopia, actually across all of East Africa. I knew that the coffee that we all like to enjoy and drink today originated from my father's homeland. And I know that most of the athletes that you guys know as Ethiopian Olympic champions most likely trained in my father's hometown. But there were also things I didn't know as a child. For example, I didn't know that despite having a university degree, that my father was once a refugee. I didn't know that the language that he spoke, Afan Oromo, was spoken by 40 million other people, and that for 100 years they were banned from speaking their language until 1991. I didn't know that successive Ethiopian governments prosecuted people who spoke this language, and that if anyone even dared to publish in that language, that they can face a result much worse than prison. But anyway, I learnt this language. I learnt it fluently during the ban from my dad here in Australia. In fact, all my siblings did. And what was striking about our ability to speak the Oromo language fluently was that my dad was able to create that in an environment that didn't support his results. He was a man who was uprooted from his country, chose to marry a woman from a completely different ethnic background, and then went to a completely foreign country that he decided to make home. And as an adult, when I reflect on this, in and of itself, it's not that hard to learn a language. It's not that hard to identify as a Muslim woman either, especially when everyone has an opinion on what you wear. It's not particularly difficult to exercise regularly, eat good food, be a wonderful person. I think what makes these things either easy or difficult is the context in which it happens. Some of you watching may know about an initiative that I founded called Afan Publications, or that I created Oromo books for children all around the world. Or perhaps that I was able to rally a global movement to revitalise and create a language revolution for children. I was able to do those things. And what struck me the most in that time was that despite a very public journey that I had, there were things that I didn't share with people. I learnt certain lessons that I'd like to share with you today. The first lesson I learnt was a harsh one. And I learnt that lesson in front of a group of 20 primary school-aged children as their volunteer weekend school teacher. I had a lot of expectations. I expected that I would be given the resources to teach these children as a volunteer person, as a volunteer teacher. Actually, I expected to be treated like a hero because I was a volunteer teacher. I expected that the products and resources that would be given to me would be appropriate for the audiences that I was supposed to be teaching. And years after realizing that none of those were true and none of those would ever happen, the fact that I realized there was a gap in publications, I had an expectation that the government, that a publishing house, an organization, somebody would do something about the fact that these didn't exist. And that's when I learned my first lesson. I realized that by having expectations of others, I began to excuse myself from responsibility. I realized that standing in front of those children, I'd actually turned into my own worst nightmare. I became an armchair critic, a fence sitter, a warrior on the keyboard. And often I would complain and say things like, I realized, or actually I learned rather, that I had become one of those people who said, the Oromo people should be doing this and the Oromo people should be doing that. When in fact, I could be doing something myself. Something, not everything. And I would often complain to my father about this, and he would receive my complaints and he would respond by laughing. And he would say to me in Afan Oromo, Toltu, quba tokko yoo namatti akeekte, quba sadii ufitti akeekaa jirta kana beekadhu toltu tiyya. Essentially, he was saying, Toltu, every time you point a finger at somebody, how many fingers do you think you're pointing back at yourself? And it was in that moment that I stopped waiting for other people to do something. And then I took responsibility. And in taking that responsibility, my life and my world changed very, very quickly. I realized that at that time, I didn't know it, but what eventually started a revolution around the world started from me picking up a pen, picking up a piece of paper, and actually writing those worksheets for those children by myself. The second lesson that I learnt was that by taking responsibility, I was able to use what I had in order to create something I didn't have. And let me tell you, when you start out doing an initiative, you never ever have all the tools available in front of you that you need. You never have the tools available in front of you. And as a university student, I was 26 years old. There were a lot of things that I didn't have. I didn't have the mass money to be able to produce the books that I really wanted to release to the public. But you know what I did have? I had time. I had the time to be creative, and in order to create fundraisers all around the world to raise that money. I didn't have the expertise as an Oromo language literacy expert that I so desperately wanted. But I did have multiple university degrees. I had experience from within our community, and I had access to network experts that I could try and rally and bring on board with what I was doing. And I certainly didn't have any examples of Oromo books that I could teach for children. But I had beautiful blueprints from other communities who'd started doing work for their own. And it was in that time that I wonder and I ask myself, and perhaps watching a lot of you sitting here, I wonder, how many of you are holding the ingredient in your hands? How many of you are holding in your hands the ingredients to fulfill the dreams of success in your own hands? And instead of doing something with it, we just choose to admire each and every ingredient we have. We talk about them, show them to other people, rather than actually cooking and making something out of it. It was from my father, who was my role model. It was from my father that I learnt to make do with whatever was in the situation around me, to make what didn't exist with whatever was in my hands. But the determination that I had to continue was given to me by the Oromo people in Oromia. Today, the Oromo people continue to pay a price heavier than money in order to assert their identity. I found it really difficult to reconcile my supposedly first world problems with the fact that Oromo people are literally paying with their lives today. What you and I will call statistics is actually people, and I've been to their country and I have seen it with my own eyes. That we call them numbers, but they are women who've lost their children permanently. They're children who have been told that their parents will no longer come back again. And there are mothers who will never see their family members ever again. And I remember the first time I created the products, the artwork for my books that I showed my dad. The first time I showed him these, my dad cried. He cried and he cried. And he said, "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my whole life." And I was fearful, because no one had ever seen what I was going to do. Not that special, if you think about the schools that we're all raised in. But the fact that his own relatives don't have toenails, don't have fingernails, that you go to the beach and you watch these guys strip off to go and enjoy themselves in the water, and you see welts all over their back. That you meet a guy and he tells you that he's impotent. I knew in that moment that I could use what I had to create something that never existed. The third lesson I learnt was almost counterintuitive. I realised that I'd become much, much more successful when I empowered the people around me to become successful. And to be quite frank, I didn't really need the Oromo people to develop my books. I could have just approached a few people, developed the product, found a rich sponsor, put it out there in front of the world, and boom, job done. But I knew that in my plan it was integral to create change in a way that empowered people to make their own versions of success. That was important to me. And I knew that by speaking the Oromo language, I was able to tap into a network of 40 million people who had a vested interest in seeing me succeed. I knew that if they saw me succeed, that they too would also be successful. And even if they weren't Oromo, even if they didn't care for my books or for my community or for my culture, they could still be inspired by my journey. Because I navigated a male-dominated world. I was a woman of colour, a Muslim woman, and someone who is a proud civic contributor in the country that I actually live in. And I realised too that often companies that we know today can go from 0 to $1 billion in value, companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, not necessarily because they create good products, but it's because they enable their users to create their own versions of success that people find value in what these companies do. And in my successes that I strived for, that I wanted to achieve, I said to myself, I need to be onto this as well. I need to involve people around me. And I can say with my hand on my heart that I invested in the people around me. And I say it with my hand on my heart to you that if you invest in the people around you, the returns will be so much greater. Because this was my secret to raising $100,000 in less than a month. It was my secret to have not one but 2 world tours and to have people await me and be so glad and pleased that something like this, which had never happened before, was happening on a global scale. And even after I developed the books, the success continued, not because I made books. My success continued because I was able to nurture opportunities for people to be able to regain what was stolen from them, to be able to retell their own language in their own words, to be able to pass on the gift from their ancestors onto their children and to release themselves from the mental shackles of language degradation that had been forced on the Oromo people. I knew that more than in creating these books, I wanted to create something more. A sense for Oromo people that when they saw my products, that they saw that they were loved, they were respected, they were appreciated, and their losses were not in vain. And it was at that point that my successes started to grow. What started off as a poster turned into books, turned into box series sets, cards, stickers, and then expanded. I ended up having animations, cartoons, animators who animated for Sesame Street came on board, wanted to work with me because they were inspired by what I was actually doing across faith, across culture, across politics, across gender. Education was the key that seemed to unite all the Oromo people within Oromia and around the world. And it's interesting because I thought to myself, I'm trying. All I can do is just start with, around me, the circle where I was, start with those children that I was focused on in that school, and people came to me because I was in fact working for them. And all these efforts, they finally got recognised. They got recognised last year when after 150 years, the Ethiopian government invited the Oromo people back into the capital city of Finfinne, which you guys might know as Addis Ababa, to hold their Thanksgiving ceremony for the first time. They invited me to attend as well. And I was excited about it. And when I arrived there, let me tell you, I was blown away. I was taken back because I didn't know that people, when I walked on the street, that people would know me. I was overwhelmed. If I told you when I arrived at the airport, people were wearing T-shirts with my names, with my face on it, saying, welcome to our country. Or the fact that I was asked to be on national television and had my speech televised to the whole nation. Or the fact that when I attended the Thanksgiving ceremony, I was there to present myself to them, 7 million people enclosed in one space at the same time. I had the president of the country say, I'd like to meet with you and say, how can we support you with what we're doing? And what started off, and this was my first post that I made. Remember how I told you when I was in front of those students and I decided to take responsibility? Put this post on Facebook. It's just an idea. I didn't try and change the world. I just focused on what was there in front of me. And I'm proud to say that yesterday, the Bureau of Education of the state of Oromo agreed to enter a memorandum of understanding so that my products, along with theirs, can be available for every single Oromo child. I'm not sure what the future will hold, but from my initial meetings, I've been informed that in my area of specialty from kindergarten to say grade 4, that there are 1.3 million Oromo registered students. And I think I'm on my way to making my dreams come true. And because the theme of today's TED presentations are future sight, I think it's only appropriate that we share our hindsights and our insights in order to develop our future sights. And that is why I've chosen to share my story with you today. Thank you.
Yes, after Hajj Alou's assassination, you are doing some campaigns at local level and also on social medias. So what are you doing after Hajj Alou's assassination and after the arrest of the prominent political figures like Jawar Mohammed and Bakale Garba?
Hajj Alou's death was a shock to the Oromo nation, both within the country and around the world. Hajj Alou Hundesa represented the hopes and the dreams of Oromo people. And while initially there was, I guess, suspicion about who was responsible for his death and for his assassination, the government's lack of accountability, the current ruling party's consequent behaviours to within 24 hours arrest the leaders of the Oromo party only places the government in a questionable position. This is a man who has won a Nobel Peace Prize and who now is responsible for jailing opposition parties and opposition leaders for the same excuses used by the leaders before him. With regard to the currently imprisoned leaders for Oromo people from varying political parties, not just one political party, they are all in prison. And this is because of a man who was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize and could not do the one thing that his award was given to him for, which is to bring peace. That was one thing he failed to do. He failed now, and it looks like he's failing in the future.
Abiy is now overlooking the Keros and Kares' precious life who bring or who paved the way for Abiy to brought him to the power. But currently he overlooked this precious life, and he overlooked everything about the Oromo question to stay on his illegitimate ruling power at the expense of the lives and livelihoods of Oromo people. What do you think about Abiy's illegitimate power and his absolute exercise of power misuse?
Abiy's behavior right now is of a man who forgotten who put him into place, who put him into the position that he's in today. He ascended into his role with one job and one job only. And the people who paved that way for him were the Oromo people, were the Ero people, because they had hope that he would bring true justice and true democracy to the country. And his consequent behavior has disappointed Ero and disappointed the Horn of Africa, and soon enough will disappoint the world. when you're given one job and you fail to do one job, then it is time that you bring people to the table who can do the job and let people choose who they want to be their leader. Ero, who he makes to seem, him and his political party, make them look like they're bloodthirsty, terrorizing, angry young youths, is the complete opposite of what happened. These are the same people he's criticizing today who brought him into power less than 2 years ago. And the convenient amnesia is shocking.
Yes, currently Jawar and Bubakale Garba was arrested underground in underground prison, in which the facilities very poorly facilitated prison cells, and it's very cold place. Yesterday, Jawar appeared on court, and he complained that they are mistreating them in the prison cell. So what do you think about the mistreatment of the political figures in Ethiopian torture chamber?
I think we need to acknowledge that the Ethiopian ruling party, who's headed by Abiy Ahmed, showed Jawar and showed Bakala Garba on their way to court and on their way back from court for a grand total of about 10 seconds. We were not present in the courtrooms. No media was allowed. Jawar's words and Bakala's words were just to be heard within the courtroom and not out in public for everybody to know. Now, we are not interested in Jawar dressing in nice clothing, or Bakala Garba wearing a black suit, or the fact that they supposedly are being looked after with masks and with gloves and with sunglasses and what have you. What we are looking for is for their freedom. They do not deserve to be in prison, any type of prison. And this was what Abiy promised when he came into power, and this is what he has failed to produce in the entire 2 years of his prime ministerialship.
Yesterday, Jawar and Bakale Garba, they appeared on court and they denied the accusation the Ethiopian regime is accusing. So he told that they are doing to push them from the political sphere. So what do you think about the accusation and the response from Jawar and Bakale Garba?
There is merit in accusations to the government, and let's put this in a simple way. Abiy was put into power to put an election. He has failed. He has instead imprisoned people around him, not from one political party, but from many political parties. The excuses we see from Abiy Ahmed is similar to those of his predecessors. None of them exist today. This is an opportunity for Abiy to really bring Ethiopia into the 21st century with proper democratic and fair elections. And he has made decisions that have put him against everything that the world believed he stood for. Abiy has an opportunity to fix the relationship, to mend the relationships, to have a free and fair elections. And the direction he's heading in now is not just a shame for the country, it is a shame for his political party and a shame for him and all of those involved with his decisions.
After Alou's assassination, the political crisis and peace crisis continued, and the government shut down internet and media like OMN, trying to silence the voice of the Oromo people. Mm-hmm. What do you think that Abiy has to promote peace and democratic transition, and he was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his promise during the 9 months of his appearance in power, but currently, opposing to his promise, he is torturing, he's killing, he's arresting, and he's silencing all the Oromo voices. So what do you think about his promise and the actual practice of Abiy Ahmed?
I think we need to start bringing context. Why is it that the youth are unhappy that their leader is being jailed? It's a simple question. There is a reason. There's been a lot of issues in the last 2 years that have been covered up, and the Oromo people in particular, not just the Oromo people, multiple nationalities within Ethiopia were hopeful for an election, which Abiy failed to deliver. He failed to deliver then. He continues to fail now. What his political party doing at this point in time is abusing the coveted prize of the Nobel Peace Prize, and has put himself in the positions of other leaders who've also turned out to be dictators. Now, Ethiopia has the opportunity to make amends. They can bring the country into the 21st century. The only person here who is behaving in unpeaceful ways is the government. And this is confusing for people, given that he won a peace award. The people are peaceful. They have been peaceful. The people, the Oromo people, the Kero, opened the way for Abiy to come. They facilitated Abiy to prepare himself for 2 years. They encouraged Abiy. And in response, he turned around, he cancelled the election, and then jailed all the leaders and did not respond appropriately to the assassination of Hajj Alou, in fact implicating himself and his political party and his, I guess, his people, his political groups that support him, in terms of appropriately giving the respect that was due for Hajj Alou-Hundesa's death. There are many things that could have been done appropriately, and it's up to him to turn the wave, to turn the tide, and if he chooses not to, then unfortunately he will be just like the leaders before him and be known as a nobody and leave his position disgraced.
What should be done to stop the human rights abuse which is currently implemented by the armed group in Oromia?
I think the Oromo world is very successful, or currently has been successful, in showcasing the plight of the Oromo people in Ethiopia, and also showing the issues that Abiy Ahmed has failed to deliver on. And so I think we've been very successful in doing that. I think we need to continue doing that. And I think we need to call for the immediate release of all political prisoners, to shut down the prisons that Abiy has reopened since he promised to close them down, and to make sure that there is an immediate opportunity for the leaders to come to the table and have these discussions, and not these closed court case rooms, 5 seconds of seeing their political leaders, keeping them all in prison, when the United States of America, a country which supplies lots of support to Ethiopia, who has more COVID-19 cases than Ethiopia, still is able to run an election. If the country wants to run an election, they will. Abiy was able to turn the country around. He's able to turn it again. If he is incapable, he needs to release his opposition and come to the table and allow us to have a voice. Business is not as usual while political leaders are being kept in prison.
Toltu, do you have any message to international as well as the diaspora Oromo community about what should be done in the future?
Yeah, I think the Oromo community, both in diaspora during the 2-week internet shutdown, has done a fantastic job of telling the Oromo story and truthfully speaking the injustices that are occurring in the country. This is a very difficult time for Oromo people, not only because Jawar Mohammed, Bekele Garba, and leaders of multiple political parties have been in prison, but this is difficult because this is not the Ethiopia that Oromo people were hoping for. This is not the Ethiopia that the world was looking for. In fact, Ethiopia has chosen to regress, and our communities collectively around the world have done a fantastic job in highlighting the issues and also highlighting the solutions. Our communities will continue to advocate for a solution that allows every single person to have a vote and a voice heard within their country. And if Abiy fails to do that, then our voices will not fail our people.
Thank you, Toltu, for joining us to share your idea on OMN. This is led to hosting this special program. And also thank you. I would like to thank Abdi Jamal for facilitating this talk show. So thank you so much, Toltu.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
abdi xumurreerra. Kam laata duraan ilaala garuu tu eerin godhin.
Very good. That was a really good interview. Jabaatee jirta. You should do English ones more often.
Xumurreeti garuu isa Ingiliffaa kana dura utuu natti ergiteetu laaluun qaba lafa idiit ta'u irra deebi'e.
Okay, rakkoon miti production isaa hojjedhee sitti ergaa yaada.
Baay'ee galatoomi toltuu tiyyaa.
Baay'ee
Yeroo
galanni
gara
kee
fuulduraatti illee sagantaa adda addaa qopheessee si affeeruu baay'een barbaada.
Thank you. Linki na ergi, okay? Linki sanillee